Welcome back to the e-learning portal. We're still on session 10, INCOTERMS 2020 rules. We've just finished with the order of the 10 A and B articles in the INCOTERMS. And in this video, we are going to answer the question, how does the choice of your INCOTERM affect transportation? How does your choice of INCOTERM affect the transport? Now, there are certain INCOTERMs for sea and inland waterway transport only. These are free alongside ship, free on board, cost and freight, and cost insurance and freight. These four INCOTERMs are for sea and inland waterways, and so we sometimes call them water INCOTERMs. If you would want to use any other mode of transport, then you would have to use the other 7 INCOTERMs remaining. The 7 INCOTERMs for the other modes of transport, apart from the water or sea and inland waterways, are RexWorks, free carrier, carriage paid to, cost and insurance paid to, delivery at place, delivered at place, unloaded, delivered duty paid. These are the 7 INCOTERMs that can be used for the other modes of transport or for multimodal transport. INCOTERMs and insurance. In the 2020 rules, the extent or the type of insurance cover is clarified. In the 2010, it was quite contentious. So here there is much more clarification as to what level of insurance cover to be procured. Typically, under CIP, carriage and insurance paid to terms, it requires the seller to obtain insurance to cover buyer's loss or damage of goods to named destination. And this should be minimum of Institute Clauses A. The Institute Cargo Clauses A. This is a more extensive cover provided by LMA or IUA or any insurance company of repute. And under cost insurance and freight, the seller is required to obtain at least a minimum insurance to cover buyer's loss or damage of goods to the named port of destination, and Institute Cargo Clauses C, provided by LMA, IUA, or an insurance company of repute, unless otherwise agreed. So that clearly under CIF, the minimum insurance is Institute Cargo Clauses C, and then under CIP, cost and insurance paid to, the minimum cover should be Institute Cargo Clauses A, which is much more extensive. What would be the factors for choice of the term to be selected? The appropriate term for any sales contract is a business decision to be taken by the seller or a buyer. And this may depend on any of the following. 1, the bargaining strength of each party. 2, the seller's export strategy. 3, the nature of the trade. 4, the availability of transport. 5, import and export regulations. 6, difficulty in obtaining export license, security clearance, and official authorization. And 7, avoiding ambiguities in use of more than one mode of transport for delivery. The next question is, how can one's choice help them to minimize costs? Because trading is about ensuring efficiency in order to make profits. So how can one make a choice of Incoterm that will help to minimize cost? Now, if you are an importer of large and irregular volumes of goods, then it's advisable to choose to arrange your own transport and your own insurance, which you can negotiate for lower rates. That would help you cut down on costs, meaning instead of buying goods on CIF contract, you can buy on free on board and then arrange for carriage and reduce cost of transportation. If you select CIF as a buyer, you would not have the means to choose and arrange for transport. That will be for the seller. So it will serve your interest if you buy on FOB. That allows the buyer to arrange for carriage. And if you have connection with carriers, then you could negotiate for a lower cost of transportation. Yeah. What would then be the main concerns of a freight forwarder in a contract of sales? What are the issues that you should focus on? 1. Your focus should be on packing, marking, labeling, and inspection. Those ancillary duties which you will be assigned a contract to deliver and make your revenue there. Loading and unloading. That's handling duties. 3. Transport, the contract of carriage. 4. Transport documents. Transport documents to meet, the compliance to statutory and regulatory measures. And sometimes the transport document serve as proof of delivery. Then insurance, the level of cover required. The next one will be delivery, the transfer of risk, or as it were, handing over. What will we be looking at when we say packing, marking, labeling, and inspection? We'll be looking at the responsibility for packaging, marking, inspection of goods, security clearance, operations, in handling before loading, and then unloading. It will also include formalities of exportation, the payment of taxes, completion of procuring and sending of documents to buyer or their banks. When we say loading is a point of concern to forwarders, what do we refer to? We're talking about who is responsible for loading. See, the responsibility may either be that of seller or buyer. So which of the two parties do you work for? Who is responsible for unloading at the port of shipment or at destination? Would the cost accrue to that of the buyer, or depending on the Incoterm selected on the seller, so that you would have to invoice seller or ensure that that cost is covered. Under carriage, a forwarder will be looking at who arranges for transport and who subscribes to the contract of carriage, so that you know who pays for the cost of transport that you arrange for, and who is responsible for goods in transit and intermediate handling and transshipment. Insurance, you'll be looking for who procures the insurance with the specific terms, because there's difference between insurance for CIF and CIP in INCOTERM 2020. What type of insurance is required, the minimum, and the risk of ownership, the need for insurance cover, and other commercial concerns. So if insurance is taken to cover transportation, then the buyer or seller would have to look for other sorts of insurance to cover their commercial concerns. Delivery or handing or taking over, as it were, this is the critical point where risk passes from or transferred from the seller to buyer. And remember, this can happen in foreign ports. This includes the carriage of product, export and import responsibilities, who pays for what, and who has the risk for condition of the product at different locations within the transport process. Yeah. That's the risk of loss or risk of damage. Damage may be due to deterioration. In fact, what I've just mentioned are those matters of concerns that the forwarder would have activities to perform, for their contracts and jobs. So that is where you focus. That is where you have responsibility. That is where you may have contract within, the use of the selected INCOTERM. Now, we will stop at this and move on. We're now going to look into details of each of the 11 INCOTERMs in the next video. Thanks.